You have on your sheet this manila one. I always take 12 minutes by the committee's request, a pastor's viewpoint. Don is a pastor and teaches pastors. So this is the first negative one I've done, meaning he's doing what pastors need to hear about applying. If you haven't seen his other books, please get them on preaching. I used the one on James in a series we did at a church I was helping at. They're so thoughtful on this kind of stuff, but also biblical text. But this is the first negative one. Forgive me. It's just that I'm getting older, and I've helped a lot of pastors. I pastored 45 years and now 8 years coaching. These are real to me, but they're not you. But share them with a friend. Why some pastors do not improve their own preaching. So I'm thinking about this. Number one, we do not worry or pray about getting better or stronger. That's not a selfish prayer. We should worry about it. I think that's one reason. Number two, we get no honest, candid critiques of our preaching. One time here in the D-Men, I was here with Jeff Arthurs from Gordon Seminary, succeeded Haddon Robinson there, also a wonderful teacher. But he said, get someone who loves you to critique your video or your sermon there. And I just laughed and said, why someone who loves you? Because he said you won't be able to stand the others. He talked about people love to critique you who hate you or dislike you at least or try to be big deals. Of pastors I've coached, I always ask them, has anyone analyzed your sermon and given you honest feedback? And most often, no one ever has, candidly. Third, we misunderstand or underestimate the huge impact of the sermon in how people decide about church. Good or bad, godly or not, when you're on vacation and you go to church, your wife knows you're irritated during the sermon, or mine always puts her hand on my knee, meaning don't stand up and say, may I please finish this? But the first thing you say about the service is either the worship or more likely, well, boy, he didn't get to that text at all. And the people where we live do the same thing when they hear us. And I'm afraid that some guys don't really, they say, well, it's worship to the Lord, it's addressed. I understand all that, of course. But most visitors go home on the basis of the sermon. They will decide if they're coming back again. We underestimate that. By the way, in answer to the question, I've heard it so many times, how did you like church? Well, his sermon was, that's how they judge the church. Next one, we're so busy with everything else pastoral and just get by with time and worry, just get by with the time and worry of the sermon. The national average is still, the last I saw was Christianity Today, 8 to 12 hours a week. I met a man once, I think I said this here once, who said God usually gave him his sermon on the way to church Sunday morning. And I didn't know what to say. There were 12 of us pastors in the room back at the chapel. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't want to embarrass him. I didn't believe it, first of all. I don't believe God gives him that. But that's not for today. But while I was being quiet, he said, last Sunday he changed the sermon on me from the time I got up from the pulpit chair to get to the pulpit. He changed the sermon on me. And I didn't know what to say then. I said, like a smart aleck, I said, did he ever give you a bad one? I did. And he said, no. And then I'm lost. Average is 8 to 12. I don't know what our prof teaches. I don't want to ask him right now because I want to say I think it's got to be over 10. And a lot of it is figuring out, after the text, is figuring out how to connect with people and how to connect with their daily lives. Here's one that may sound ambiguous. We think we are as good as we can get, sometimes even blaming God for limited gifting. You are not as good as you can be as a preacher. I am not. I always be improving. But to do that, do these ways of input and get help from others. I remember a guy my second year in Ashland, Ohio, who said to me, you never smile when you preach. He was another pastor, Jim Custer, a good friend from Columbus, and I never thought about that. It seems like a trite thing to say today. I had a broken tooth. I lost a fight with my brother. I lost almost every fight with my brother, big guy. And so for 7 years, I had a chipped tooth. They didn't fix it in those days till you were 21. So I never smiled then. So once I got the tooth fixed, I still never smiled. The first thing I say, forgive me, Dr. Sanukian, when I see a sermon is, you never smile, just because that impressed me so much. I smile when I tell people they're going to hell. I do. You're going to hell. You're not going to like it. I just smile. Anyway, the big point there was that helped me work at a particular area of church life. You ought to be better next year than you are now at sermons. Yes, we measure how effective they are. Yes, we know if we did a good job. Yes, it's horrible. You know it. When you're in the middle of a sermon and it's yours and you know it's not good, especially if you got to do it 2 or 3 more times. They get to go home. I remember thinking that. For 10 years at the chapel, I did 5 a Sunday, honest. And I remember often thinking, this is first sermon, this is bad. They get to go. I got to do it 4 more times. You do go out and change something or learn to smile. Here's one. None of these are deep. We think we will improve gradually. That's not true. The longer you preach, the better you ought to be, but it's not going to happen just because you did another sermon. I beg us all to work hard at it. And finally, and this is smart, Aleck, but based on talking to guys and asking them what they do to help, we do not take time or initiate to learn from veterans like Dr. Sanukian. Did I spell it right? You don't even have one. It's Sunukjian. He's an Armenian, but he does believe in security at times. We do not take time or initiative to learn from veterans, sometimes only noting trends pushed by newbies, 3 of whom lost their jobs this year. Now that's just plain smart, Aleck. But just because somebody does something a certain way doesn't mean we should copy it. Learn from veterans and finally, the people who, this is maybe sounds too light, but I really believe it. The people who know us and love us love our preaching. The same people will come up to you in every church. Everybody has it here. If you thought the sermon was bad, you'll walk over to where they are. Because one time Pete even slept through the whole sermon, and he told me what a good sermon it was. He just is used to doing that. He's an encourager. He doesn't love the Lord like he should, or he wouldn't have slept. But I do think people hear from others, that was really good, and it just they don't know what to say when they leave. What are they going to say? Boy, you blew that second point, didn't you? Or you never smiled. No, a good sermon. I think that's a crucial one. Or maybe this last one. You write in, not now, but when no one's looking, if you haven't been working hard on improving sermons. Those are some thoughts from the oldest man in the room, and sincere ones, because I think I want to be better at preaching next year than I am this year, and we all ought to keep working at it.